Hey friends, and welcome back to our series on studying effectively for GCSEs and A-levels. In this video we will be discussing something that I wish I had learned so much sooner, and that's the idea of fixed mindsets and growth mindsets. As always, timestamps will be in the description down below, so do check those out during the video. So as always, I think it's first useful to understand the problem faced before we can begin to see why the solution is useful. If you have ever been on an online community like the student room or r/sixth form on Reddit, then you will find so many posts of people complaining about how they're just bad academically and they're not a so-called maths person or a physics person. And if their brain was just more like such and such a person from their class, then their life would be so much easier. Or you find people who are so self-conscious about their own abilities that they would just jump on any opportunity to shoot someone else down and make them feel bad for not achieving better results. And when people are catching up to them, then they get offended and start attacking others for no reason and stuff like that. Or you will even find thousands of posts about people asking whether or not they're good enough for Oxford or Cambridge, and are so fixated on what other people think about them and seeking approval from others. Now, I try to avoid going on these online communities because I find myself wasting too much time reading these posts. And I'm not sure about what aspect of human nature it is, but for me at least, I find myself reading way too many of these posts despite them literally adding no value to my life. But back to my point, generally the students making these posts and doing these things are those with what is known as a fixed mindset. Essentially, a fixed mindset is where you believe your character, intelligence, creative abilities, and everything else about yourself is fixed and cannot change. You believe that you cannot do anything about it, either you're born like that or you're not. And I think the American professor of psychology at Stanford, Carol Dweck, puts it well in her book called Mindsets: The New Psychology of Success, when she writes that, for 20 years my research has shown that the view you adopt for yourself profoundly affects the way you lead your life. It can determine whether you become the person you want to be and whether you accomplish the things you value. How does this happen? How can a simple belief have the power to transform your psychology and as a result your life? Believing your qualities are carved in stone, the fixed mindset, creates an urgency to prove yourself over and over. If you have a certain amount of intelligence, a certain personality, and a certain moral character, well then you'd better prove that you have a healthy dose of them. It simply wouldn't do to look or feel deficient in these most basic characteristics. I've seen so many people with this one consuming goal of proving themselves in the classroom, in their careers, and in their relationships. Every situation calls for a confirmation of their intelligence, personality, or character. Every situation is evaluated as, will I succeed or fail? Will I look smart or dumb? Will I be accepted or rejected? Will I feel like a winner or a loser? There's another mindset in which these traits are simply not a hand you're dealt and have to live with. Always trying to convince yourself and others that you have a royal flush when you're secretly worried if it's a pair of tens. In this mindset, the hand you're dealt is just a starting point for development. The growth mindset is based on the belief that your basic qualities are things you can cultivate through your efforts. Although people may differ in every which way, in their initial talents and aptitudes, interests, or temperaments, everyone can change and grow through application and experience. Do people with this mindset believe that anyone can become anything? That anyone with proper motivation or education can become Einstein or Beethoven? No, but they believe that a person's true potential is unknown and unknowable. That it's impossible to foresee what can be accomplished with a few years of passion, toil, and training. So essentially, having a fixed mindset is generally when you avoid feedback and take criticism personally. You believe that either you're born good at something or you're not. You give up too easily or too soon to avoid looking bad. You resist challenges and all sorts of things. Now, this is why the growth mindset comes in useful. Rather than thinking about how dumb I may be or how smart others may be in comparison, it's much better to forget these labels and instead focus on how much effort you may be putting in, how much you're persevering with these problems and the work, who you can learn with to improve the most. So growth mindset students believe their abilities and intelligence can be developed with effort, learning, and persistence. They aim to stretch themselves and take on new challenges and tackle more difficult problems because they know that only through this will they be better and be able to achieve better scores. I think that the Nobel Physics laureate Richard Feynman puts it well in this interview.
You asked me if an ordinary person, by studying hard, would get to be able to imagine these things like I imagine. Of course, I was an ordinary person who studied hard. There's no miracle people. It just happens they got interested in this thing and they learned all this stuff. They're just people. There's no talent, a special miracle ability to understand quantum mechanics or a miracle ability to imagine electromagnetic fields that comes without practice and reading and learning and study. So if you say, you take an ordinary person who's willing to devote a great deal of time and study and work and thinking and mathematics and time, then he's become a scientist.
So I think that the professor of psychology, Carol Dweck, offers some good actionable points for how you can go about developing a growth mindset. But as for the first step, she says that...
So listen to that voice. It's constantly running in your head. And I actually recommend that as a very, very first step. The first few weeks that you embark on this journey, don't push yourself to exhibit any growth mindset characteristics. Just listen to that voice that says, don't try this, you might look foolish. You made a mistake. If people knew that, they wouldn't look at you in the same way. That person's better than me, I hate them. Just whatever that voice is saying in your head, listen to it. And even do it with friends, discuss it. Or when you see someone doing something that looks effortless, are you thinking, oh, they're just brilliant and talented? Catch yourself thinking that. Or someone who's struggling, are you thinking, oh, they're not really good at that? Albert Einstein says, I'm not that smart. I'm not smarter than other people. And he meant it. He said, I just stick to things longer. That's why people thought he was slow originally. He knew he didn't understand time, space, energy, and so forth. So I would say the very first step is the first few weeks, just listen to that fixed mindset voice. It's there. We all have it. And if you don't hear it, it will rule your behavior.
And after noticing these triggers or this voice in your head, it's helpful to tackle them if you can. If you find yourself avoiding a hard maths problem because you're afraid of looking silly, and then you should remember that it's better to tackle the problem to actually get better at the subject, rather than pretending you're already good at the subject by avoiding looking silly with that problem. And this idea of a growth mindset that I learned about shortly after year 11 completely changed my approach to A-levels in sixth form. When I didn't understand something in class, then I would put up my hand and ask questions about it, even if the questions may have appeared dumb. These labels and dumb were meaningless for me anyway at school. And I asked some questions that had seemingly obvious answers, and people in my chemistry class would often laugh at some of my questions because they seemed so obvious. But you know what? That didn't matter at the end because I achieved the best results in the class just by asking all these questions and making sure I understood everything whilst I was learning it then and there with the help of the teacher. And I think that asking questions without caring what others think is especially important, and it brings me on to something known as the spotlight effect. Essentially, the spotlight effect is a belief that people have where they think that others tend to notice them and think about them more than they actually do. And this stems from the fact that you're always living your own life and you don't see yourself through anyone else's eyes and whatnot. So whilst you may have done something silly in the moment, I find it's helpful to remember that no one actually cares or remembers because everyone else is busy living their own life to care. And for those who do remember and do care and bring you up again in front of you, well, they clearly have nothing better to do. So just keeping this fact in mind made me care less about potentially looking silly in front of my class and others, and allowed me to focus on learning the best that I could with the help of the teachers. But I think that the most useful thing you can take from this video is that rather than telling yourself you're quote-unquote not a maths person or something like that, or saying that you can't do this, or that your test score is bad and you're not cut out for physics or something like that, instead add the word yet at the end of all those sentences, saying that I don't understand this topic yet, or that I'm not a maths person yet. Because after all, remember that with a growth mindset, you can get better at any subject. So rather than worrying and trying to become the best in the class or something, I think it's much more helpful to try and become the best at getting better. Because by doing that, it's way more helpful to improving your performance in both class and in other areas of your life. Ultimately, the most important thing to remember is that having a growth mindset is a lifelong journey. You should be monitoring your thoughts and realizing the times when you're thinking in a fixed mindset way, and try to approach things in a more growth mindset way by taking on and sticking to challenges, asking questions, learning from others, and just forgetting about the labels of smart and stupid. And do remember that it's possible to have more of a growth mindset in some areas than it is with others. Whilst I do have a growth mindset in some areas like maths and physics, I still catch myself having fixed mindset thoughts when it comes to doing other things like writing and literature. And then I remind myself that I'm not good at writing yet, and I actively work to improve on that. But yeah, that's basically for this video. If you want to learn more, then I would highly recommend searching growth and fixed mindsets on YouTube and looking at a few other videos. Some of the videos by Carol Dweck on the subject are really good, and I have linked some down below in the description. But for now, I guess I'll see you in the next one.